The world is deeply worried about the changing climate due to the increased use of fossil fuel and the dumping of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Are there solutions? I have with me Ayhan Evrense. He's a communicator, a nuclear communicator to be precise. He has worked extensively in the nuclear communication area. He's an independent consultant now, but before that, he was with the Global Nuclear Watchdog, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, and also with the regulator in the United Arab Emirates. Ayhan, if nuclear energy offers a carbon-free source of base load power, why is the world resisting using it?
That's, if I had the answer in one go, I would have made a lot of money. But it has a lot of historical connotation. First of all, nuclear did not really start for peaceful purposes. It started, the major word nuclear started with an atomic bomb. So that has a very deep-rooted negative understanding in people's mind. And people, we have to admit that, we have to accept that, and we have to move on. And second, although it's, as you say, a baseload energy source, it can run 24/7, it has a minimal carbon footprint, its waste is actually the most regulated and the best known waste of all energy sources, and yet the anti-movement is using sentiments instead of science. And the nuclear sector, in its last 60 years of peaceful energy production, so to say, has basically used science as the basis of its communication, but not the emotions. Only in the last 10, 15, 20 years, we're actually seeing that the nuclear sector is also adapting to it and trying to get the people to understand we're actually there for you. We are your energy source. We're providing 11% of the world's electricity, and that is free from carbon. The message we are starting to hear only lately. That's a good improvement, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
But is there a communication problem or is it a technical problem?
I don't think there's a technical problem. People, when I talk to people, they always go, what about Chernobyl? What about Fukushima? Well, yes, there has been accidents, and nobody ignores this, nobody avoids those accidents to talk about them. On the contrary, nuclear is probably one of the rare sectors, high-tech sectors, which takes lessons from the past. So each accident, each anomaly is worked and lessons taken and then adapted. More or less like the car industry. I mean, were we using seat belts and head cushions in the cars 30 years ago? No. So many people died, and the car industry had to come up with solutions. So nuclear is the same. When you compare the energy sources, the least fatality causing energy source, unbeknownst to many people, is actually nuclear. When you build a dam, there is more concrete, there is more construction, and there is more industrial fatality happening than many of the other sectors. So in terms of carbon footprint, it can compete with other energy sources. In terms of fatality, it can compete. In terms of land use, water use, and what most people actually ignore, in terms of health effects, direct health impact due to particulate emissions. I mean, there are 6 million people dying a year prematurely in the world, and that's a WHO, World Health Organization figure, simply because they are inhaling bad air. And nuclear has no emissions, neither carbon nor particulate emissions. In that sense, we need to bring these messages out to people saying, fine, you want energy, you want it 24/7. How do you want it? You cannot just rely on wind and solar, which are great sources, but you cannot rely on them. Nobody says they're bad. What the nuclear sector says is, we are part of the solution. Don't diss us, don't ditch us. We're part of it.
But then why is there so much resistance in accepting it? The world leaders don't seem to be going nuclear or the atomic way.
Maybe the hesitation or the decision to phase out is probably exaggerated, because at this moment there are 30 countries using nuclear power in the world, plus Taiwan. And only one has a clear phase-out policy, and that's Germany. About 4 or 5 of them has a passive phase-out policy, meaning, okay, we will run the current reactors as long as they run, and when their operating licenses expire, we will not refurbish them, we will not extend their lifetime. So that makes altogether 6, 7 countries that have a phase-out policy. And when I say phase-out, some of these second category phase-outs are looking into the next 10, 15, 20 years. So they're not phasing out now. There's only one country that will phase out from nuclear in 2022, in 2 years, and that's Germany. So when we say, why are the world leaders not embracing it, actually, there's a lot of new build going on. There are over 50 reactors under construction across the world at this moment. This will add a lot of capacity, production capacity to the grid. But, of course, first of all, the world population is getting bigger. Second of all, the other energy sources responding to the world population increase are also getting bigger. So the nuclear share, although nuclear in itself percentage-wise is increasing, its share in the electricity cake is not necessarily increasing. But when you look at science, when you look at the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the only authority in the world that looks into all kinds of sources, and the International Energy Agency, also looking into all sources, they both say there is no way to reach any of the Paris Agreement goals, whether it's 2050 or 2100, in terms of limiting the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. There's no way to achieve it without nuclear power.
See, the most energy-hungry countries are India and China, and both seem to be embracing nuclear in a big way. What does that show you?
China is no doubt the engine at this moment, the driver in nuclear power expansion and nuclear power plant construction. But yet, China is also adding massive wind power and solar power to its grid. And local solution for China, they're still adding coal power plants as well. So the share of nuclear, again, not only in the world, but also in the Chinese case, is not growing so much. They have five-folded their nuclear power capacity in the last 20 years. Its percentage within the Chinese electricity cake just increased 1%. So although nuclear in itself has grown 500%. India is doing. The situation with South Korea is in limbo. Nobody knows. But there are also a lot of newcomer countries that have not had nuclear power plant construction or experience.
UAE, you have experience.
UAE.
It's so much petrol, but they still want to go nuclear.
Yes, but UAE had a logical idea. Why do we need to burn our petrol for any purpose, energy production, heating, desalination, whatever it is, when we can actually sell it more expensive? This was a very, very sensible economic decision, so to say. And nuclear is 24/7. You know it's there. Uranium mines or uranium resources are there in the world. The current known resources will last 100 years with the current capacity.
In an open fuel cycle.
Yes, in an open fuel cycle. If the closed fuel cycle comes in 20, 30 years on a commercial scale, this will go into thousands of years. And traditionally, just like in the oil, if the prices ever go up in the uranium market, there will always be more uranium resources deposits that are researched and that are found and that are then starting to be excavated. Currently, the uranium market is so depressed that actually some mines are closing in Africa and in Canada and Australia. So the more the more demand is there. It's a paradoxical situation, but the more demand is there, the uranium prices will probably go up, and then you will find more and more uranium resources. But at this moment, there is no problem with the uranium. And the one interesting thing about nuclear fuel is any price increase in uranium, the raw material, is reflected minimally in the end user. But what happens with oil? If the OPEC ministers disagree in a Vienna meeting, the next day or the same afternoon you feel it in the gas pump in your car when you try to fill. It suddenly goes from 120 to 140. What happened? Well, because the guys in Vienna the OPEC ministers couldn't really agree on something. Or agreed on something, which is also a big news. But in uranium, it's not like that.
In Vienna, you also have the global nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, where we are sitting and talking. And you worked with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Why does the agency find it so hard to communicate its ideas to lay people, and why are people so suspicious about nuclear?
Okay, the agency's mandate is, if I remember correctly, to accelerate and enlarge the contribution of atomic energy for peace, health, and other purposes. So this was the mandate since 1957. And for a long time, people had this disagreement about, is our mandate to promote nuclear energy or not? Well, actually, the agency's mandate is very clearly written. Promote and accelerate the use of atomic energy. And that includes for health purposes, for industrial radiography, for plant breeding, as well as for energy production. So the nuclear sector is so big. A research reactor has so many good uses. The power reactor mainly produces electricity. But in a smart city concept, in a smart grid concept, and this is slowly coming, you can do a lot more with the nuclear power plant than just electricity production. You can desalinate water. You can heat your city. You can cool your city. So there's so many side uses of power plant output. Now, the IAEA is a member state-based organization. There are only 30 countries that have nuclear power plant that are producing electricity from nuclear power in the IAEA, and yet it has over 180 member states. So maybe, let's say, 100 of them are neutral to what you say, but the other 60, 70 are relatively anti. The odd thing is that the IAEA is based in Vienna, a country which is constitutionally anti-nuclear. You cannot propose the construction of a nuclear power plant for electricity production in Austria, and yet the IAEA is headquartered here. But that's okay for us because we don't get, when I say we, I'm sorry, I'm not with
the agency.
I'm not with the agency anymore, but the IAEA does not get into prescribing the member states what to do. The IAEA is a place where safety standards are written together with the member states. Guidance is brought up together with the member states, and information sharing. So what the IAEA can do is produce the science, saying, look, this is the science. The science from IPCC, the science from International Energy Agency in Paris, and our scientists, our economists say you cannot achieve the 1.5 degree scenario without nuclear. Now, it's up to your parliament, it's up to your president, it's up to your people to decide whether you want to go that way or not.
Both of us are in a meeting which is called Let's Talk Nuclear. But the world doesn't seem to be talking nuclear. It's talking against nuclear.
The tides are changing. There are lots of former anti-nuclear intellectuals who have turned pro-nuclear in the past 8-9 years. Especially Fukushima, interestingly, brought a lot of interest. It's a perplexed situation. We're all shocked by the death of those thousands of people in Japan that were caused by the tsunami. And yet, not a single death has so far been certified to the nuclear accident that followed the earthquake and the tsunami. And people remember Fukushima only with the nuclear accident. People seem to forget that within 2 hours, 19,000 people were wiped out, not by the earthquake, but by the tsunami, 14-meter, disastrous tsunami. In Chernobyl, 57 people's, 57 first responders' death have been specifically proven that were caused by overdose radiation. Very sad for them. About 4,000 people have developed thyroid cancer, but they're not likely to die of that, because since then the thyroid cancer handling has moved on so well that these people are alive and kicking, and they're living their own lives. So the fatalities from nuclear is so low, and yet the anti-groups that are using emotions and sentiments is just endless. Now, when we say the world is not talking, again, on Twitter, I follow very closely. When somebody posts something, suddenly people from Australia, people from India, people from Norway suddenly come up and correct each other, or correct the other one who is accusing. So we have had a lot of environmentalists now coming up. And my point is, you don't have to be pro, but you don't have to be anti as well. You just have to believe in science. What does your science say? Now, you must be a nutcase if your doctor tells you not to do sports when you have a heart condition, and you continue doing sports, and then you accuse the doctor.
So that was Ayhan, as clear as it can be, that nuclear is part of the solution for the world's energy generation in the energy bouquet. And unless nuclear is embraced in a big way, we would still be emitting a lot of carbon into the atmosphere, and we would have very bad repercussions because of climate change. In Vienna, at the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the global nuclear watchdog, Pallava Bagla,